Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a fantastic point. So thank you for saying that. Let's jump on to the investment side of things, right? Because like since you started, you've raised almost $230 million, which is pretty amazing. So congratulations on that. And you talked about your first funding round was what was that company again, like in Los Angeles?
Kind of weird. So yeah, it's an accelerator in LA called Amplify LA.
Yeah. And so, so from that point to the next point, right? Because you talked about the $1.3 million raise, right? And so I'm assuming they still funded you. Is that right? Or did they not fund you at that time?
So yeah, Amplify has continued to participate in each of the rounds, but they haven't led subsequent rounds, but they have put more capital into Flowcast. So I feel very good about what we've done for them. I take a lot of pride in like getting them a return on their investment because they took such a big risk for us. So it's been awesome that they've put more money in along the way and have made even more. So that's cool.
And so, the first one is, why did you choose the investment path, the funding path?
Because I want to build a public company and I don't want it to take 30 years. So let's take on some money. And cool. it comes down to, I'd rather own a smaller portion of a massive business.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a massive business. It's pretty massive compared to most. It's probably just not as massive as what like you want it to be by far.
We're working on it. We're going to make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first part. Cool. And so that's connected all the way through the past job and now the company which you founded, which you co-founded, right? Now, when you got that 1.3 mil, what changed like in kind of how you were operating?
Not much. I mean, it was just like, okay, here we go. We had to hire some people. It was the first time we ever had to hire employees. We finally got the hell out of the accelerator and we got to rent a little house that we all worked out of to get the company off the ground. So it was like, we went from being 3 guys who overstayed our welcome at the accelerator because it took us too long to raise money to, all right, we're out of here. We're going to go get our company started. And we were off and running at the house, hiring some engineers. So that was the first, time working with non-founders. And that's interesting. We had to let go of a couple of people really early, but we did end up making such amazing hires out the gate, many of whom are still with us today and have played huge roles in Flowcast. So it was that hiring people and getting used to building a team was the big thing.
And then because I'm going to keep this part short because there's just so many parts to it, but 1.3 million, what year was that?
That was in 2013 was when I started the process. I think we closed the round in 2014.
And then that's 1.3 million. And then in July, you got 110 million. So 100 times the size of the raise, right?
Yep.
Did much change in the process between the 1.3 million raise and the 110 million raise? Or was it similar?
Yeah, no, the 110 was so much easier. The 110, easiest round I've ever closed. It was just like, we didn't even close a round, right? People were coming to us with term sheets. It was, the 1.3 is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. The 6.5 was probably the hardest one that I ever did in my life, but 1.3 was brutal and took a lot. It was a lot of no's, a lot of work, and like very close to just packing it up and calling it. The 110 is way different. And we're at a point where people believe in the business. They like me personally. They've seen me grown as an entrepreneur. And so it's just a very, very, very different conversation.
Okay. So the 1.3 was a game changer, right? And kind of at that point, like you were saying that like in the first kind of 18 months or whatever it wasn't really a product. There wasn't really much to do. And so like you were practicing a lot of pitches, right? And, kind of trialing the story and so on, right? How important was that practice to being able to close that 1.3?
So the 1.3 was closed it was like 6 months after we joined Amplify LA. So I would say the biggest thing I did was when I started Flowcast, I hated speaking in front of people. Like I could not do public speaking. I would not do this podcast right now. This would have been incredibly intimidating to me. So one of my things was actually starting to go to Toastmasters and like work on public speaking and get some confidence around it and practice. And so that component, and that was incredibly helpful for anyone who is self-conscious about public speaking. Cannot recommend Toastmasters highly enough. It's literally life-changing for me. So with that, I can now speak in front of investors. I got more practice with customers. That was no problem. I refine the pitch, work on, and read body language and see reactions and what resonates with them, what doesn't resonate with them. So a lot of practice, but Toastmasters, really the training was like the biggest thing for me with presenting.
Yeah. And that's something I can confirm as well. There've been quite a few people that have worked at Web Profits that stepped into like a leadership role and they weren't really comfortable talking. They went to Toastmasters, come back from there, changed it just changed them. Like they had something to focus on. They had a structure, and then they found themselves after that, right? So it kind of helps get you comfortable talking in front of people. So I think that's a fantastic point. Did much change in the business now that you've raised 110 mil, or is it like the first time round, or is it now it's like, cool, now we've got to go accelerate way faster now?
Well, yeah, the pressure is always there because we're a high growth, VC backed SaaS company. And so the pressure to grow is there every year. Right now I'm having a bunch of calls with VPs and directors that are like, oh my gosh, next year is going to be crazy. How are we going to do it? We're lining up for a crazy year. And I'm having to remind them like, hey, this is the 4th year in a row we've had this conversation. We've hit all the other 4 years. We'll make it happen. Yes, it's big, but we're going to go make it happen because that's just what we do as an organization. And so, the stress is always there with planning. I would say it's, I think about what are the bets we're placing, because those are the ones that are make or break for the company in the long run. So like, what bets are we placing next year or maybe the year after? And how does that stage us for, getting to the IPO? Or our goal is we want to be $1 billion of ARR as a business. So what bets do we place now that put us on that trajectory? It's a long way out in the future, but decisions you make this quarter affect what your business looks like in 6 years, right? So we need to be thinking that way right now. So I put more stress around the others, like bets that we're placing and making sure they're going to pay off in the long run.
And I'm sure you're pretty good at forecasting, to being an accountant by trade, accountant by childhood, accounting software company. Your forecasting must be pretty damn tight right now, right?
I built, when I was doing it, man, it was like every dollar was entered into whenever it was going to actually be spent. Like the forecast was shockingly accurate. And yeah, of course we have a great accounting department, great finance function. Everything's really good. It's, I love our finance team. Mm-hmm.
And so like investors must love you because you've got the numbers tight. You've got the numbers like locked in. And so then it's about kind of the dream, right? And selling the opportunity.
In fact, I know them too well. I got accused of being a know-it-all when I was raising money, because they're like, yeah, they'll say, Mike, you should do it with this. And I'm like, well, actually the numbers are this and this and this. And I know every metric, and they're just like not used to CEOs knowing the metrics, because CEOs are salespeople for the most part, or engineers. And so I'm like diving deep on it, and they're like, Mike won't even take feedback. He's a know-it-all. And I'm just like, whatever. I just know my answers. Sorry. I know my business too well. I don't know what you want. I don't know what you want from me, but whatever.
Yeah, but they wouldn't be used to that because, like it's hard to be across the numbers at a level of understanding that accountants would be, right? But you're an accountant founder, so
I think that's truly what it was. Is I remember it was specifically on the metric called churn. And when churn is it's seemingly simple, but very complicated and very theoretical. And you can have philosophies around it as well. So we start just going down the freaking rabbit hole. And I could tell this guy is not being used to being questioned on anything or anything like that. And, I'm happy to spar and debate about it. And I think the dude just did not appreciate that. And so me being hard-headed was the feedback that was provided to the person who gave me the introduction. But it was just another no I got along the way. Here we are. It's fine.
So you've raised a lot over the last 8 years, right? So what have been the biggest lessons?
The biggest lessons for me are, relationships really, really matter. People talk about, I don't know, there are a lot of the vulture capitalist like mentality, and they rip you off and all this kind of stuff. The reality of the venture market is it is such a relationship driven game that people really want to do what's right by the founders and the entrepreneurs. Like there's so many times where, maybe we're trying to make a decision where, let's say we're going out to raise money. Technically, our current investors have something called pro rata rights, and they could shut down a round of funding and basically make it impossible for me to raise money. Every company has this. So if you look at the legalities of it, you're like, oh, this is scary. But when you get in the real world, none of them actually do that, because then they're not playing nice with the founder. They're not playing nice with the investment community. And so like, documents get thrown away in the spirit of reputation and relationship management. And I think that's something that's been a big learning for me. And I don't know, it adds a lot more flexibility to conversations if you know that that's how people think. So I'll throw that as one thing. Two is I went way too deep in the numbers way too early on. Like, you do not need to pitch that stuff. I think there's actually a lot of benefit to not knowing all the answers, leaving things somewhat ambiguous, and doing a lot more arm waving than I did early on in the history of pitching. And so just like more arm waving, less details, get people more excited about it, and then let them ask you the questions and you can fill in the details from there. You don't have to regurgitate everything at them proactively.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, you know, is there anything which you thought was true that wasn't? You know, starting out, you thought this is how it is, but it's just not like that at all.
It's the venture stuff. It really was. I was being warned with like, do you really want to? Are you sure you want to do that? Blah blah blah. And it's like, you know, this could happen, and this could happen, and this could happen. But between my conviction of like, we're going public, so a lot of these clauses that we're talking about, I don't care about it. Like there's this concept of preferred versus common shares, and a lot of it centers around when is it. So I'm like, that's fine, but we're going public, so everything converts to common, and I don't really care about the share of class or the class of share at that point. And then just in spending more time with them and getting to know them, VCs will make decisions that are not necessarily in the best interest of their firm in that exact moment, because they know that making that decision in that moment is actually macro the best decision for their fund, because it maintains reputation and all of that. So that's just something really important to notice, is it's really a relationship game, and have good relationships with your VCs. And the old trope of like, hey, you're marrying this person, you're going to be with them for a while. It's true. Get used to working with them, and make sure that it's people you really want to work, like humans you really want to work with. And that was the biggest thing that we focused on for our last round of funding. Is we had, 7 or 8 term sheets, and I was in a really nice position where I could basically pick and choose who I wanted involved in Flowcast. And Meritech led our round. George Bischoff's a partner, and George is just like gold reputation, great human being. I'm so thrilled that we get to work with him. And that's that's where my head is at now. And for example, we turned down higher valuations. Like, we had term sheets at a higher valuation, but Meritech and George are just so gold standard reputation that they're the ones I wanted to work with, and we selected them as the lead. And
I mean, how cool! Like, you flipped it on this, you flipped it on its head. Like, what was it, 7 years ago? Like, you're begging, and now you get to choose. It's like fantastic work on that. I think we only have time for just one more section, right? And we'll keep it kind of concise. Your culture side of things, you've been named in best places to work from Inc., from Los Angeles Business Journal, and built in LA, for an accounting firm, right? And it's competing against lots of other, it's a software company, but it's an accounting software company, but it's competing against basically all the other industries, right? What's your approach to culture at Flowcast?
Yeah. So, when I
started
the
company,
company,
in this conversation about you hire accountants first and then you train them how to sell and whatever. But yeah, please.
One of my favorite things is like, how do you get people fired up about the mission of what we're doing? Because it's not like we're here to, save the world or anything like that. So what I have found is the easiest way to get people excited about what we're doing is to hire people who dealt with the pain point, which is accountants, right? So they come in here, they're like, oh my gosh, someone's helping with this. That makes a lot of sense. But I would say, just taking a step back, accountant or non-accountant. So I was just a guy in the trenches doing work when I started Flowcast. I wasn't a manager or a director or anything like that.